Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Jeremy Solnick, in case you didn't know. My friend Jack Klaff, who's going to come on in a second, is going to read you 2 monologues from my epic poem, Rivonia. Jack and I grew up in South Africa. We were students at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. We both left South Africa for England in 1973 at the height of the apartheid era. I to study law and Jack to pursue his career as an actor. We each participated in a small way in the struggle against apartheid, but some of Jack's relatives were deeply involved and suffered harsh interrogation and imprisonment for their activism. The trial of Nelson Mandela and his associates is known as the Rivonia trial, and it took place in Pretoria in 1964. Mandela and his comrades were found guilty of sabotage, and they could have received the death penalty. The South African government and white public opinion were overwhelmingly in favour of this. Instead, they all received life sentences. My poem is written as a series of dramatic monologues made by people either involved with Nelson Mandela or with the struggle against apartheid. Each of the speakers tells their story and the ways in which Nelson Mandela influenced their lives. The 2 monologues Jack is going to read provide an imagined account of how the judge came to pass sentences of life imprisonment. The first monologue is from the prosecutor and is spoken on the night before sentencing. After this, there will be a short interval. The second monologue is spoken by the judge a few hours prior to sentencing. South Africa was a terrible place under apartheid. My poem was written for the men and women who found within themselves the strength to oppose that tyrannous regime and to bring about a replacement by a democratic government. Their struggle was epic, and I hope something of that comes across in the sections you're about to hear. Thank you.
The prosecutor retires to his study. The prosecutor has retired to his study to prepare his closing speech. The rush hour is nearly over. He moves to the window of his flat in a smart tower on Parktown Ridge. The window is ajar despite the chill Joburg winter. The roar of traffic from Jan Smuts Avenue reminds him of game at a waterhole. He frowns at the blur over Soweto, where the fumes of thousands of cooking fires darken the winter sky. Then he runs his finger across the sill where the house girl left some dust. These people are unclean, he mutters. Then he prepares to pray. As he always does at this hour, he winds the old leather thongs of his grandfather's tefillin tight around his left arm and scarred hand, turns in the direction of Jerusalem, adjusts his talit, and begins. Almighty, give me strength to defend this state against those who defy it. These men deny your presence and scorn the sanctity of your will. Let me be an apostle of truth, like a prophet of ancient Israel. Let my voice rage against this darkness. Shine your light on the Afrikaner people in their struggle against the Philistine, as you did on the children of Israel. They too flung off Pharaoh's yoke. They too wandered through the desert. Now they are your shepherds in this land, where enemies attack them from all sides. We battle for our future in this court, where we weigh our arguments on justice's scales. Shall we bow down before the golden calf? Shall we obey these godless acolytes and surrender our birthright to terrorists and communists? Or live as free men under your mild yoke? Now I set aside my robes of prayer and take up my pen. The world waits for me, and it shall see the tempered steel of South African justice. Mandela played the sentimental card, the noble appeal to great causes, democracy, equal rights for all. But I have exposed his falsehoods. Their counsel was impudent today. He challenged my witness. My poor man thought it was an attack by the devil. He forgot everything I had told him. He even admitted he was not at the farm when that scoundrel Mandela was there. Then it was said that I coached the witness. I had to clarify my man's testimony. Your Honor, I said, the witness is a policeman, a servant of the state. He would not lie. He would not defile the sanctity of a court with a conman's treacherous tongue. There is too much disrespect in this court for those who dutifully serve the people. After Mandela spoke from the stand, the whole gallery stood and cheered. His Honor should have cleared the court, not let him drink deep from that heady cup. That was a bold move of his to speak out like Cicero before the Senate or Mark Antony before the baying Roman mob. No hunter prepared more thoroughly than I did for that cross-examination. My nets and snares were set, my blades honed, and the beaters briefed and ready. But Mandela leapt from my trap, bright as a tiger. He roared, and the whole world heard him. I wove new ropes to bind him. I lured him into my chamber and lulled him with songs and sweet wine. I tied his locks to the beams of my house and cried out, "The Philistine is upon you!" But he shook out his tresses and snapped his bonds like thread. "Give us our freedom," he cried. "You oppress us with your laws. Your rod falls heavily on our backs. We plow your fields and slave in your mines. We sweat in your mills and factories in return for the gleanings and the scraps from your tables." But his people are children, fledglings on a branch clamoring for food. Their new feathers are yet untested. Shall we neglect our nest and leave them to the fangs of the boomslang? Shall we shake the tree until they fall squawking into the jaws of the meerkat? Providence has given us the guidance of the ship, and it is our destiny to sail it. The crew may not question the captain. It is their duty to obey his orders. It is God's decree that this people be a light to the nations, a beacon of truth to shine upon this heart of darkness. Mandela and his crew admit they seek to overthrow the state. They have gathered weapons and explosives and are trained to use them by our enemies. They say they do not seek to take life or harm the innocent, but this is lip service. No cause is greater than the rule of law. The state has a duty to uphold the law. And I am an officer of the state, charged to enforce its will, to punish those who by their treasonous actions undermine the foundations of our peace and unity. Their punishment must be as thunderous as the broadside of a battleship. False prophets must die by stoning because they cheat people of the truth. The coinage they offer is counterfeit. Their fly-paper words trap the unwary. People are foolish. They fall for his lies like crocuses blooming before the spring or trout rising to the angler's lure. And yet, what is it that he seeks? A free society in which all people live together in harmony. These words of his seemed to come out of some deep chasm, as though the earth itself sang out some melody that I had long forgotten, whose chords strike tremors in my soul. Merciful God, why does my chest constrict as if it was bound with hoops of iron? My hand shakes, and I recoil from my duty as from a buffet or a scorpion. A voice out of Egypt roars in my head, loud and clear as a mountain torrent. Let my people go! Let my people go! This is madness. I'm the Attorney General, the prosecutor in this case, an eminent lawyer, but above all, a rational man. I will not let these wild thoughts deflect me from my duty. The world watches us, and it shall see that we are resolute. Let them hang and ask God for mercy. But surely we are the agents of mercy. If we, men of faith, strain to be merciful, What rain can fall on this fragile land? The salt winds will blow and the desert drive back the green fields. The crops will fail, and where the sweet meadow blossomed, the hyenas will stalk. Without mercy, we become the thing we hate. A wolf that devours its children, a tyrant who preserves himself by terror. We put our trust in financiers and generals. Our enemies encircle us. We cannot find peace, for shalom can only come from God. Be that light unto the nations, she said when she came to plead for her husband. Give him bail, she said. Let him go, man of the Sanhedrin. It is in your power. He's not a saboteur. He has not killed. He is a good man who cares for his children. Prison sucks the life from him like a sponge. But crafty as a jackal, I refused her plea. Though I knew he was not a saboteur, it is his eloquent tongue and clever pen that condemn him in my master's eyes. They are not ones to let the niceties of the law come between them and those they desire should suffer. By this I prove my loyalty to the white tribe, that hound-like I pursue my own people. I claw their eyes and tear their flesh, so my masters can gloat that they are undone by one of their own. Is your conscience clear? She asked, and wept as she left my chambers. Why should it not be? I observe the law. I keep the Shabbat. I perform the mitzvot. By what right does this tearful apostate cross-examine me on my conscience? But her question burned me in my core. My finger stumps throb and burn as though the wounds were still fresh. Oh, my fingers. In the pit of the night, they point at me, shouting and accusing. My dreams drag me back to my father's butcher shop. A brash young fool playing the fool, sneaking into the shop during Shabbat, breaking the law and shaming my parents just because I wanted to go to the movies. A massive fridge door stuck and then groaned painfully as I heaved it open. Warning enough for a brash boy who disobeyed the law. I had 30 pounds of choice steak to mince, and 10 chickens to pluck and kosher. A big order for a fancy bar mitzvah. Cracked white tiles ooze filth. The old mincer snarls in its corner. I am bound on the chopping block. My gown is in tatters and my papers strewn around me. Then my hand is in the mincer, my arm is on fire, and there's blood, blood, blood. The sheets are wet with sweat. I run to the bathroom and vomit. I stare at my ruined finger stubs. My hand throbs like an engine. The scars are puckered and livid. Darling, my wife calls from the bedroom. Something I ate at lunch. I somehow reply. My father lost the order and much else. He was waiting for me with his strap when they let me out of Grote Schuur. Your fingers are your punishment from God, he said as his arm rose. This is from me. I was changed after that. I knew my direction. It was the law of God and the law of the land. Thou shalt not kill. That is written. And all Israel stood there to witness it. If I stain my hands with their blood, my soul will answer for it someday. And who will plead for me before his throne? Better for 1,000 guilty to live, so the Rambam said, than for one innocent to die. And where is the evidence that they killed? They plotted, yes, but they only disrupted. They destroyed things and endangered lives, but they did not take life. The Platteland clamors for the gallows, and my masters, God-fearing men that they are, give way like a pack of jackals before their pride. Yet, the righteous state tried and hung the little clerk who killed no one, but assiduously carried out his orders. The backroom fixer who ran the railways, told the lies, took the bribes, kept the books, and distributed the festering booty to his ravenous, murderous masters. Now, I know that we serve the same masters, the little clerk and I, he willingly, I out of ambition. And I must do their bidding, whatever the cost to me. I've plunged into wild waters that carry me far from the shore. Only the current can bear me back. Swim out the window then. Let the sweet wind caress my face. The song of angels ring in my ears. The city spread out beneath my arms. One moment of exhilaration as I reach up for my maker, then oblivion and the long night. No, I cannot. A hand is uplifted. Something bars the way. What now? What is my course? I must swim for land or drown, like that old skellum on the island, that Marcanda, who gave the British hell and gave himself up for peace. The noble fool, did he think the British would welcome him like a prodigal? Honour and fair play are not for savages. They only apply to gentlemen schooled on the playing fields of Eton and Harrow. He learned the truth soon enough that they shut him away at Robben Island. Martyrdom. Mandela would welcome it. Death is a stage he would gladly step onto. with Winnie in black as his weeping widow. That's a sting that would poison the platelant. It would swell up and burst like a rotten fig and spill its bile across the country. His people will flock to her banner like the slaves did to Spartacus. What slaughter came with that revolt? Mayhem will descend on our land. The Vaal will run red with blood. The air will fill with the cry of crows, and crucifixes will line the boulevards. Dissuart, Chafar. Hellish vision foretold and anticipated. That is too great a price to pay for the death of any man. And I, a Jew, the instrument of his destruction. His blood on my hands, his death at our door. Dark angel, I beg you, hear our supplications. Pass over our houses. We have daubed our lintels with the blood of a lamb. We are of the chosen people. It is others you seek, not us. If he must live, that we may live, let him end his days on Robben Island. They know how to deal with his sort there. He can set up a podium in his cell and make the lime quarry his auditorium. He can listen for the voice of Makanda, if he can hear it over the surf and the gulls. What would freedom mean to him? Boss would hunt him down like a rat. He would never spend a night in peace. Oh, he'd end up in a ditch with 20 trenched gashes in his head. A prison cell is a refuge for such a man, a harbour from the storms of open life. He will sleep such a sleep there that his name will become a myth. People will say, once there was a hero, a man who could lead us from this hell, who knew the way to the promised land, but he was taken from us and borne away across the water. He will return someday when the nations turn their faces from us and drive us from the fold, when we grow weary of wandering after 40 years in the desert and cry out to our leaders, we're done with hating. It is time for us to change. I must go to His Honour, Justice de Wet. He brooks no interference in his court. I can ask and try to persuade, but only he can decide their fate. The future of our nation is in his hands. Seldom has a judge been so alone or had such need to confront the pack. His lawyer was one of the good people, and his father was a lawyer and a mensch. One acquainted with the need to compromise. He rode with the Boers against the British. But when war ended, he chose to serve the crown, and yet remained at ease with his countrymen, a bulwark of his tribe who kept the faith by respecting men and women of other faiths. De Wet is not a man who likes the rope. They say he put his black cap on just once, for the rape and murder of an innocent girl. The state may justly take the life of those who take life, but must show mercy to those who merely oppose its rule. Mandela's speech may well have tipped the scale. Please, God, let my arguments fall on fertile soil. In the judges' chambers, stand below the amphitheatre. You're reduced to an ant. No, less. A microbe, if time is accounted for in the eternal ledger of our Maker. Your soul is drenched with water music, as drawing into itself countless rills and streams, the Tugela leaps for the sea. Follow its path down through the hills. The houses and farms become smaller and smaller. The grazing herds disappear. The green hills blur and vanish into a haze. Far below you, other tributaries join it. The buffalo, the clip, the Moy, and the blood. The land seems so verdant from these heights, so still and fertile, so full of peace. And the river is so full of memory, for water gathers memory to itself along with the grains of soil it carries from the mountains to the sea. The history of this land and its inhabitants is held fast in its aqueous embrace. And you are in the current. You're tumbled through rapids below, frowning cliff faces. You drift languidly through pleasant pastures. The icy winters freeze and crack you. The veld fires scorch you to the bone. Go to Tugela mouth, teller of tales, and drink deep. For there are your stories. See that wiry man crouched over his fire. He grinds ochre and charcoal for paint and sings a hunting song to himself as he sketches an outline on the rock face. Long after the last of his tribe is hunted down, his wife raped, and his sons enslaved, men will come to his cave and marvel at his running elat. The judge is in his chambers. Pleadings have closed, and it is time for him to deliver his sentence. The fate of Mandela and the other defendants is in his hands. He knows what the folk expect of him, but he's uncomfortable. There's a knock on the door. The prosecutor enters. You greatly surprise me, Mr. Prosecutor. I've been listening to you for months as you've stood before me and declaimed, waving your arms around like Cicero. You have not missed an opportunity to portray the accused as a grave threat to the safety and stability of our fatherland. I thought to hear you howl for your death, howl for their death, like the crowd at the Colosseum. Your duty, Mr. Prosecutor, is clear. Law and order should be at the forefront of your mind. Yet here you are talking in riddles reminding me of Christ before Pontius Pilate. Has some jackal bitten you? Are you now mad? I have heard you are a religious man who observes the detail of the Sabbath, as familiar with God's law as the state's. You'll find I know my Bible as well as any man. A learned doctor you may be, but you shall not tutor me in my court. You, Jews, have no monopoly on truth here. We both come, as you rightly say, from people who love justice and fear the Lord. But those who love justice must uphold the law. These are dangerous men. They are men of ideas, men who inspire. For them, the end justifies the means. This Mandela draws others into a maelstrom, a violent whirlpool that will suck us all under. I am the dutiful son of a great father, and I uphold the ideals that he stood for. He fought for the Afrikaner, for the folk. He rode with Louis Botha against the British. But then he studied at Cambridge. He did not surrender to hatred, as many in this country have done. My father represented the British Empire. He knew who was ruler and who the ruled. The Boers lost that war, but they won the peace. There is place in this land for all its people, for the Boers, the British, and the Bantu, but Mandela's men forget their place. They oppose the order God has ordained. My father goes back a long way in this land. We are not newcomers, not jetsam like you. Refugees from the ghettos of Europe. My mother's grandfather was a trekboer. He came north with Trichard and Potgieter. Hendrik Skeepers was a leader of his family. 400 head of cattle and 5 wagons. He was a man of substance for those times. But sorrow was never far from his door. He was out hunting in Zulpansberg with his eldest son, tracking an eland. The boy went too close to a cliff, and its treacherous lip gave way, pitching him headlong into the void. Hendrik heard the boy's agonized cries. He crawled to the edge and saw him pinioned on a ledge 80 feet down. his right leg twisted beneath him. They had no rope, but Hendrik tossed down a water bottle and they prayed. After an hour, the vultures came. Hendrik said they looked like priests, strutting around the boy, nodding their bald heads, waiting. He shot through, but soon the sky filled with wheeling shadows. His son lay on an altar, out of reach. No angel came. No ram caught in a thicket. "Kill me, Pa!" the boy said. "Don't let them have me." And Hendrik, who never missed his mark, shook as he pulled the trigger. Then he rode away like a madman. He couldn't speak until the dominie put his hand on him and called out in God's name. And they wept together. Yes, we Afrikaners have bled for this land. And we also know concentration camps. We starved in Bethuli and Elwell North, and in Barberton they smoked us with dysentery and typhoid. After the boy surrendered, my father found his twin sister in Irene, starved and delirious. The wind blew her from his arms. It has not escaped me, Mr. Prosecutor, that although my court is filled with men of your faith, in the dock and before the bar, you seem uncomfortable among them. I sense a hostility beyond the usual rivalry. You act like a hound on the spoor of lion, or a swimmer struggling in a current. You appeared before me 5 years ago, prosecuting a murder case. The accused had beaten his wife savagely. The woman came to Johannesburg to find her husband who had lost his way. You, as I recall, argued firmly for death. That Indian, Mohammed, was for the defendant. The man wept. He had loved his wife and he hadn't meant to lose his temper. He was with a lover when she burst in, and the shame of the truths she told him were too destructive of his dignity to bear. Such is the nature of this state. Our pass laws wrench apart those who God has joined together. Muhammad reminded us that life is sacred in all our religions. The state, he said, has a duty to preserve the lives of its people, not to destroy them. The deliberate annihilation of life is in itself a crime against humanity. By this long-delayed and irreversible act, we usurp the power of our Creator. Redemption is always possible. However heinous the crime, if the state takes the life of those in its care, then the dignity of the human is denied and all other rights are undermined. Clemency, Muhammad said, is a sweet fountain of wisdom from which judges should drink often. But you are unpersuaded, prosecutor. Crocodile tears, you responded. The defendant feels more sorry for himself than his victim and his children. Your Honor, you said, may I remind you that although not mandatory, the death sentence is intended by Parliament as a deterrent to protect the weak from violence. With the greatest respect, Your Honor, if you allow yourself to be swayed by theatrics, you send a signal to every thug and robber that they can thwart the law and escape justice. I urge you to eschew my opponent's vague and lofty sentiments and be pragmatic. This crime demands the ultimate penalty. With cut and thrust the arguments raged as you fought like Hector and Achilles, while I looked down from the battlements. Then I stopped you and gave him 15 years. He wrote to me last year from Victor Fester to thank me and to say that his mother-in-law had visited and brought his teenage son. You say these men are communists. That's as may be. But in my court, they will get the justice their Russian friends would not give them. In Stalin's country, they know how to deal with bushfires. Sabotage and treason get a swift bullet that strikes a sinner like Jove's thunderbolt. But we, Afrikaners, believe in the law. The tablets from the holy mountain, before which we bend our knee. The word which holds everyone equal is the central pillar of our temple, which this blind Mandela and his motley band plot to pull down. What is all this talk from you of martyrdom? These men are communists and atheists. They do not believe in heaven or hell. They want to blow up buildings. And they don't care if people die. Like pickaninnies, they throw stones and are surprised when windows break. And yet, as you say, there is something substantial about their manner. They are not my usual fare of thugs, gangsters, racketeers, shebeen queens, and murderers. They have a dignity about them, a certainty of purpose, like men going about God's business. I have listened to them all carefully, particularly to this man Mandela. You thought you'd scourge him when he came to the witness box? I saw your eyes gleam as you shuffled your papers. But your whetted blade was wasted. Your prey tricked you. He showed himself a statesman, fit to govern our complicated nation. The evidence suggests they took care in their acts of sabotage to avoid harming people. Yet so strong is his conviction, he would sacrifice his own life for his cause. You gave him a podium, prosecutor, and he mounted it. The court fell silent like the congregation on Good Friday when the bishop comes to the pulpit. Seldom have I heard such a sermon or such eloquence and self-confidence. He's a prince of his people, an oak of the forest. My grandfather on my father's side, Johannes Jacobus de Wet, Opa Jan, loved wood. His father made ox wagons that were renowned throughout the land. All the track boers came to his workshop in Parel to place their orders. Pretorius, Trichardt, even Hendrik Potgieter. In his youth, Opa Jan was sent into the forest to learn the ways of wood from the woodcutters, which trees would serve men well. Tough knobthorn for the disselboorns, lemon wood for the fellows and the break shoes, wild olive for the yukskei. Then, despite warnings, he journeyed to the Dargle Valley, to the primeval forest, to seek out yellowwood and stinkwood, the fine furniture he loved to make. Something happened to him in there which turned his head. He vanished. After a month, they gave him up for dead. 3 months later, he walked into camp as if he'd been gone 5 minutes. He couldn't say where he had been or how he had lived in the forest. He would just smile and look back right through you in a strange way. People thought he had second sight. He used to put me on his knee and tell me stories with the same ending. Renkie, he would say, a shoot from a stump of Jesse will come before you. And you must know him for who he is. Trust in God and choose the righteous path. For the fate of our people is in your hands. I too went to the Dargle after Stellenbosch. It's a strange and wild place. There are hidden valleys where the footsteps of man are unknown, where you can believe God still walks in the cool of the evening, mourning the loss of Adam and Eve. Have you been into the forest, prosecutor? I doubt it. You're a man of the city, not a son of the veld and the vlei. You do not know the strangeness of it, or the delicacy, or the fear of its hostility that grips your throat, freezes your limbs, and blanks your mind. The further I got from the road, the more confidence drained from me. The forest drew a curtain of fern and thicket behind me and hid my path from me. I passed on through groves of stinkwood. Lianas hung thick from ancient trees, festooned with gaudy forest orchids. As I climbed, the ground grew boggy underfoot. I crossed many streams, some of crystal rushing down from the escarpment, others whose course was clogged with roots and debris or shattered scree through which the water oozed like blood from a deep wound. My head throbbed to the cricket's song, my hands were raw, I gasped for breath. It was evening when I found a path. It wound around the base of a cliff and led me to a sheltered valley. At the far end, a grove of wild figs and the welcoming mouth of a cave. Rock of ages cleft for me. Mother Earth opens herself to us, and we return to her embrace in the hour of our weakness and our need. Near the entrance was an ancient hearth. I gathered brushwood for a fire, laid out my bedding, and slept deep. I woke late and explored my shelter. How long had humans come here? What stories were told? What dances danced? The painter's art had captured them. The walls, fervent with hunters, dancers, and antelope. In the center, a great eland presided. Beneath, on the floor, a shattered watch engraved J.J. de Wet. Thank you for coming to see me, Mr. Prosecutor. You have reminded me of words I had long forgotten. I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. The way I must take is now clear to me. I shall drink from the cup of clemency. The lives of the defendants are in my hands. But their blood shall not stain them. The state shall have their freedom. More than this I cannot do. I am no prophet to foresee the path ordained for them. They must make their own choices. I have made mine. I shall stand before my Maker with my head held high.